The dense foliage of Nexus 7 parted beneath Kalen's combat knife. Sweat trickled down his temples as he navigated the alien jungle's suffocating heat. 3 years since desertion, and the former elite soldier still moved with military precision despite his ragged appearance. His once pristine uniform hung in tatters, replaced by a patchwork of local materials and salvaged gear. Kalen paused, senses alert to the symphony of alien wildlife. Something was wrong. The distant chatter of arboreal creatures had ceased. He crouched lower, fingers tightening around the hilt of his blade. War had shaped Kalen into a weapon, but it was war that ultimately broke him. The memories of what he'd seen, what he'd been ordered to do, haunted his nights and shadowed his days. He'd fled not out of cowardice, but from a profound moral exhaustion. The Terran militia's increasingly brutal tactics had transformed an already ugly conflict into something monstrous. His ears caught the faint whisper of movement, too deliberate to be an animal. Survival instincts overrode his weariness. In one fluid motion, Kalen flattened himself against the broad trunk of a fluorescent tree and became utterly still. The being that emerged into the small clearing moved with preternatural grace. Tall and powerfully built, yet undeniably feminine. Her skin held a subtle lavender tint that seemed to shift with the dappled sunlight. Elaborate markings adorned her exposed arms and face. Not decorative tattoos, but natural patterning that emphasized the alienness of her beauty. She wore fitted armor of an unfamiliar material that seemed to flow like liquid metal across her form, accentuating rather than concealing her athletic physique. Lyra of the First Hunt was growing irritated. This scouting mission should have been simple, but something felt wrong about this section of forest. Too quiet. Her hand rested on the curved blade at her hip, a traditional Eshka weapon that marked her status among the Amazonian Rintai warriors. The weapon was as much a symbol of honor as it was a tool for battle. To the Rintai, failure in battle was worse than death. Capture was unthinkable. A dishonor so profound it resulted in the loss of one Saren, the spiritual identity that separated the worthy from the fallen. Lyra had risen to become one of the most respected hunters of her tribe, her victories celebrated in the songs of her people. She paused, scanning the treeline. Her violet eyes narrowed as instinct warned her of danger. Too late. Kalen launched himself from concealment with practiced efficiency. He'd survived this long by choosing his battles carefully, and something about this alien warrior told him she was dangerous beyond measure. The element of surprise was his only advantage. His first blow caught her off guard, not a killing strike, but a precise hit to incapacitate. She reacted with astonishing speed, pivoting to meet his attack despite her surprise. Their bodies collided in a furious exchange of blows. Lyra fought with the ferocity of her people, her movements fluid and precise. But Kalen fought with the desperation of a man who had nothing left to lose. When her blade sliced across his ribs, he barely registered the pain, responding with a sweeping kick that temporarily unbalanced her. The fight was brutal but brief. A miscalculation sent Lyra crashing against a gnarled root structure. The impact drove the air from her lungs and sent a shooting pain through her side. Before she could recover, Kalen was upon her, pinning her with his weight. Blood trickled from a gash above her eye as she glared up at him with undisguised hatred. Kalen's mind raced with possibilities. He hadn't planned this encounter, but survival on Nexus 7 required adaptability. This warrior would know the terrain, the dangers, perhaps even safe locations away from both Terran and local patrols. For a fleeting moment, a darker thought crossed his mind. Slave traders operated in this sector. A warrior of her obvious caliber would fetch a substantial sum, enough to secure passage off this forsaken planet. The thought sickened him almost instantly. He had left the militia to escape becoming a monster, not to become something worse. "I have no wish to kill you," he said, though he doubted she understood his language. Lyra's response was a stream of musical syllables that needed no translation to convey their venom. She struggled against his restraint with renewed fury, reopening the wound at her side. Fresh blood darkened her armor. Kalen made his decision quickly. He struck with calculated force, enough to render her unconscious but not to cause serious harm. As her body went limp, he felt a pang of something like regret. With practiced efficiency, he bound her hands and feet with synthetic cord from his pack. The wound at her side needed attention. It wasn't immediately life-threatening, but infection in this environment could kill within days. He cleaned and dressed it with antiseptic. From his dwindling medical supplies, his movements clinical and detached. When Lyra regained consciousness, the jungle was cast in the eerie blue glow of Nexus 7's larger moon. She found herself propped against a tree trunk, her wounds treated but her limbs secured. Across a small campfire, the human watched her with guarded eyes. The shame of capture hit her with physical force. She was Saren lost now, worse than dead in the eyes of her people. Her gaze burned with hatred as she stared at her captor, silently promising 1,000 deaths if she ever freed herself. "You need water," Kalen said, approaching cautiously with a canteen. When he held it to her lips, she turned her face away in defiance. "Suit yourself." He set the water within reach of her bound hands. "But you'll need your strength if you hope to kill me later." The night passed in tense silence, neither sleeping more than minutes at a time, each watching the other with suspicion across the dying embers of the fire. Morning brought the torrential rains common to this season on Nexus 7. Kalen fashioned a crude shelter from large fronds and positioned Lyra beneath it, her back still against the tree. Her wounds showed no signs of infection yet, which was fortunate. He had used the last of his antibiotics on her. "We need to move," he said, gathering his meager belongings. "This area isn't safe." Lyra remained defiantly silent, though she had begun to watch him with calculation rather than blind hatred. She had expected torture, immediate death, or worse from her human captor. His restraint confused her, making him more dangerous in her eyes, not less. Monsters that behaved unpredictably were the most fearsome of all. Kalen loosened the bindings on her feet enough for her to walk, but kept her hands secured. He gestured toward a barely visible path through the undergrowth. "That way." She spat at his feet, but rose gracefully despite her restraints and injuries. If she was to die, she would do so with a dignity befitting a warrior of the first hunt. They had traveled less than a mile when the forest around them erupted into chaos. A massive, six-limbed predator crashed through the vegetation, its chitinous hide gleaming with bioluminescent patterns. The creature's sensory stalks quivered as it oriented on the scent of blood, Lyra's blood. Kalen reacted instantly, shoving Lyra toward a dense thicket. "Hide!" he commanded, drawing the creature's attention with a sharp whistle and the flash of his blade. Lyra hesitated only a moment before logic overrode pride. Wounded and bound, she stood no chance against a mature Nexa beetle. She ducked into the undergrowth, using the skills of a lifetime spent hunting to become invisible among the foliage. From her concealment, she watched as the human faced the creature with nothing but a standard blade and what appeared to be a crude projectile weapon. His movements were precise, obviously trained, but against such an opponent, his chances seemed negligible. Yet he fought with surprising effectiveness, using the terrain to his advantage, luring the creature into tight spaces where its bulk became a disadvantage. When the Nexa beetle charged, Kalen rolled beneath its slashing limbs, slicing at the less armored joints with his blade. The battle lasted minutes that felt like hours. When it ended, the Nexa beetle lay twitching in its death throes, and Kalen stood bleeding from a dozen minor wounds. He approached Lyra's hiding place, his breathing labored but controlled. "It's dead," he said unnecessarily, extending a hand toward the thicket. Lyra emerged without accepting his help, her expression unreadable. But something had shifted in her assessment of this human. He had protected her when he could have used her as bait or simply left her to die. More intriguingly, he had fought with a controlled precision that reminded her of the disciplined warriors of her own people, not the chaotic brutality she'd been taught to expect from humans. The incident created a fragile, unspoken truce between them. As they continued their journey through the hostile terrain, a reluctant cooperation emerged from necessity. When acid rain began to fall, Kalen shared the protective covering from his pack. When they encountered poisonous vegetation that resembled edible varieties, Lyra subtly shook her head in warning. They made camp that night in the hollow remnants of a massive fallen tree. The space was cramped, forcing them into closer proximity than either was comfortable with. Kalen rebound Lyra's wounds with the last of his clean bandages. He noticed her watching his movements with less hostility than before. "You fight well for a human," she said suddenly, the translated words awkward but comprehensible through the universal translator embedded near his ear years ago. Kalen's surprise must have shown on his face because her expression hardened again. "Do not mistake observation for respect, captor," Kalen said. "My name is Kalen. Names are earned, not given," she replied coldly. "You have not earned the right to be named in my presence." Despite her words, it was the first voluntary communication between them, a hairline crack in the wall of her resistance. That night, a violent storm rocked the forest. Thunder shook the ground with concussive force as lightning turned night to day in strobing flashes. The hollow log protected them from the worst of the elements, but the temperature dropped precipitously with the storm front. "We'll freeze if we don't share warmth," Kalen said matter-of-factly. Lyra's expression contorted with disgust. "I would rather die." "That can be arranged if you insist," he retorted, "but it seems a waste after surviving that Nexa beetle." Something like grim amusement flickered in her eyes before she mastered it. "Untie my hands. I give my word as a warrior of the first hunt that I will not attempt escape during this storm." Kalen hesitated, studying her face for deception. Finally, he reached for the bindings. "If you're planning to kill me," he said as he worked at the knots, "at least wait until the storm passes. Neither of us would survive a night out there alone." Once freed, Lyra rubbed her wrists where the bindings had chafed. She made no move toward him, either aggressive or otherwise, merely arranging herself as far from him as the confined space allowed. But as the temperature continued to plummet, physics won out over pride. By midnight, they sat shoulder to shoulder, the minimal shared body heat making the difference between discomfort and danger. "Why did you not kill me?" Lyra asked abruptly, her voice almost lost in the howling wind outside. Kalen was silent so long she thought he might not answer. "I've seen enough death," he finally said. It was not the answer she had expected, and it troubled her more than any declaration of dominance or ownership would have. It suggested complexity where she had expected only brutality. Her cultural teachings had no framework for interpreting this behavior from an enemy. As the storm raged on, Kalen found himself unexpectedly telling her about his last mission with the militia, the one that had broken him. "They ordered us to eliminate an entire settlement. Women, children, elders, it didn't matter. They called it pacification. I called it massacre." His voice was flat, emotionless, as if the memory could only be accessed through a protective barrier of numbness. "I refused. Turned my weapon on the command officer instead. That made me a deserter, a traitor. Been on the run ever since." Lyra said nothing, but her posture had changed almost imperceptibly. She was listening not just with hostility now, but with a warrior's assessment. "Among my people," she said slowly, "to disobey a dishonorable order is the highest form of loyalty to our true purpose." It was as close to approval as she had come, and Kalen recognized it as significant. "And what is your true purpose?" he asked. She turned to look at him, violet eyes reflecting the sporadic flashes of lightning. "To protect life, not destroy it needlessly. We are warriors, not butchers." The storm passed by morning, leaving behind a transformed landscape of broken vegetation and standing water. Lyra made no attempt to escape when Kalen stepped outside to assess their surroundings, honoring her word despite her captivity. When he returned, she held out her wrists without being asked, another small indication of the shifting dynamic between them. "We need to find higher ground," he said as he secured her bindings, though notably looser than before. "This area will flood within hours." Lyra nodded in agreement. There's a plateau 2 days' journey northward. The hunting is good there, and few predators venture to that elevation. It was the first time she had voluntarily offered information that might be useful to their survival. Kalen recognized it as a significant concession, though he remained cautious. "Can I trust this information?" he asked directly. "I have given my word for the duration of the storm," she replied with cold dignity. "I did not promise to lead you to safety afterward, but neither will I lead you to immediate death. Such victory would be without honor." It was calculating and honest, a characteristic Kalen was beginning to associate with Lyra and perhaps her people more broadly. They began their journey toward the plateau with a new, tentative understanding. The terrain grew increasingly difficult as they ascended. Twice they were forced to backtrack when the path became impassable. By midday, they had made frustratingly little progress. The humidity was suffocating, insects swarmed in clouds around them, and Lyra's wound had begun to seep through its bandage. "We need to rest," Kalen said, noticing the growing pallor beneath her lavender skin. "Weakness is death in the jungle," she replied, but her usual defiance lacked conviction. "So is infection." He guided her to a relatively dry outcropping of rock. "Let me check your wound." The injury had indeed worsened. The edges showed the angry red of infection beginning to take hold. Without antibiotics, her condition would deteriorate rapidly. "There's a plant," Lyra said, her voice tight with pain. "Tall stalks with purple flowers. The sap has healing properties." Kalen raised an eyebrow. "And you're telling me this because dying of infection would be an ignoble end," she replied sharply. "I still intend to kill you, human, but I will do so at full strength, not weakened by fever." He almost smiled at her persistence. "Fair enough. What does this plant look like exactly?" With Lyra's detailed description, Kalen found the medicinal plant within an hour's search. Its application was painful. The sap burned like acid when first applied, but its effectiveness was undeniable. By evening, the angry red had receded from Lyra's wound, and her color had improved. They made camp in a small cave formed by overlapping rock formations. Kalen built a small fire near the entrance, more for light than warmth in the tropical climate. As night fell, the distant cries of hunting predators echoed through the canopy below them. "Your bandaging technique is practiced," Lyra observed as Kalen checked her wound again before settling for the night. "You were a healer as well as a soldier?" "Field medic training," he replied. "Everyone in my unit had basic medical skills. Turns out keeping your squad alive is more efficient than constantly replacing them." She considered this with a slight tilt of her head. "Pragmatic. My people believe that to save a life creates a bond between savior and saved, a debt of honor that cannot be easily dismissed. Is that why you haven't tried to escape since the storm?" Kalen asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "Some kind of debt because I treated your wounds?" Lyra's expression hardened. "Do not mistake temporary cooperation for acceptance of my captivity. I remain Saren lost because of you. That is a wound no medicine can heal. This Saren, it's important to your people. It is everything," she replied, an unexpected intensity in her voice. "It is our soul, our honor, our place among our ancestors. To be Saren lost is to be nothing." For the first time, Kalen glimpsed the true depth of what his actions had cost her beyond the physical captivity. He had inadvertently inflicted a spiritual wound far graver than the physical one he had treated. "And there's no way to reclaim this Saren once lost?" he asked quietly. Lyra turned away. "It has happened only 3 times in our recorded history, each through acts of such extraordinary valor that songs are still sung of them." Her voice became distant, reciting what sounded like learned text. "Through blood and sacrifice, through death and rebirth, the fallen may rise again." The conversation lapsed into silence, but something had shifted between them yet again. Kalen found himself watching her not as a captive, but as a person, complex, cultural, carrying her own burdens and beliefs. And in her moments of unguarded observation, Lyra began to see the contradiction in the human before her. capable of violence yet gentle in his ministrations, her captor, yet increasingly her protector as well. They reached the plateau late the following day. As Lyra had promised, the area was rich with potential food sources and relatively free of the larger predators that roamed the lower elevations. A series of interconnected caves provided natural shelter, and a freshwater spring emerged from the rock face nearby. That night, after they had eaten a meal of local fruit and small game that Kalen had managed to trap, he made a decision. "I'm removing your bindings," he said, approaching where she sat near the fire. Lyra's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Why?" "Because we both know that if you want to kill me in my sleep, you could have done so 3 nights ago when I nodded off during the storm." He knelt beside her and began working at the knots. "And because I'm tired of pretending this is still a captor-captive situation. We both know it's evolved into something else." "Has it?" she challenged, though she did not pull away as the bindings fell from her wrists. "What would you call it then?" Kalen sat back on his heels. "I don't have a name for it. Survival partnership, maybe. For now." Lyra rubbed her freed wrists, studying him with an unreadable expression. "You understand that by your own cultural logic, I remain your prisoner, regardless of whether I am bound." "I left my cultural logic behind when I deserted," he replied. "I'm making this up as I go." A sound like distant thunder interrupted their conversation. But the sky was clear, stars scattered like luminescent spores across the darkness. "That's not weather," Kalen said, moving toward the cave entrance. Lyra was already on her feet, her body tense. With alertness. "Aircraft," military grade by the sound of the engines. They moved in silent agreement to a better vantage point, crouching behind a rock formation that provided cover while allowing them to scan the night sky. Within moments, the source of the sound became visible. A sleek patrol vessel bearing Terran militia insignia, its searchlights sweeping the canopy below. "They're hunting someone," Kalen murmured, instinctively pressing lower against the rocks. "You," Lyra said with certainty. "That vessel bears the markings of your former allegiance." Kalen's expression darkened. "They shouldn't still be looking for me after 3 years. Unless you know something that makes you dangerous to them even now," Lyra finished his thought. Their eyes met in the darkness, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. This was no random patrol. This was a targeted search. "We need to move to more secure shelter," Kalen said. "That search pattern will bring them directly over this plateau within hours." Lyra hesitated only briefly before nodding in agreement. "There's a system of deeper caves beyond the spring. We may find concealment there." The fact that she included herself in this plan of evasion without question marked yet another evolution in their relationship. They gathered only essential supplies before making their way toward the spring and the cave system beyond. The passageways were narrow and winding, requiring them to proceed single file in near total darkness. Kalen led with his small light source, Lyra close behind him, her hand occasionally brushing his back to maintain contact in the narrowest sections. They had penetrated deep into the cave system when the ground beneath them shuddered violently. Dust and small rocks showered down from the ceiling. "They're using sonic charges to flush out hiding places," Kalen said grimly. "Standard search procedure for difficult terrain." Another blast rocked the caves, this one closer. A significant section of the passage behind them collapsed with a deafening roar. "Our retreat is cut off," Lyra observed, her voice unnaturally calm. "Then we keep moving forward." Kalen increased their pace, painfully aware that they were being driven deeper into what might become their tomb. The next charge struck directly overhead. The ceiling gave way in a catastrophic cascade of rock and debris. Kalen felt Lyra's powerful shove from behind, propelling him forward just as the passage collapsed. He rolled with the momentum, coming to rest several feet ahead as dust filled the air, choking and blinding. When the dust began to settle, his light revealed a solid wall of rubble where the passage had been. Of Lyra, there was no sign. "Lyra," he called, scrambling to the rock fall. "Can you hear me?" Silence answered him, punctuated by the settling of smaller rocks. Desperation drove him to begin clearing the debris with his bare hands, heedless of the cuts and bruises forming. The work was futile. Tons of rocks separated him from where she had been standing. Logic told him no one could have survived such a collapse. Yet he worked until his hands were raw and bleeding, calling her name with increasing hoarseness as dust clogged his throat and tears cut tracks through the grime on his face. It was hours before exhaustion finally forced him to stop. He sat with his back against the rubble, head bowed in defeat. The realization of his loss hit him with unexpected force. Somehow, without his conscious awareness, this alien warrior had become important to him. Not as a captive or even as a survival partner, but as something more fundamental. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the silence. "I never meant for any of this." A faint sound from within the rubble snapped him to alertness. He pressed his ear against the rocks, scarcely daring to hope. "Kalen." The voice was weak but unmistakably hers. "I live. For now." Fresh energy surged through him. "Lyra, are you injured? Is there a way through on your side?" "Trapped," came the reply, each word sounding like it cost her considerable effort. "Pinned beneath. Cannot move. I'll find a way to you," he promised, already scanning the rock face for any weakness, any possible path. "No." Her voice strengthened slightly with urgency. "The charges, they will continue. Go. Save yourself." The suggestion struck him as absurd. "I'm not leaving you." "Why?" The question held genuine confusion beneath the pain. "I'm already Saren lost. You owe me nothing." Kalen pressed his forehead against the cool stone separating them, emotions he had thought long dead surging through him. "Because I need you to live," he admitted, the words emerging unbidden. "Because in this godforsaken place, you're the only thing that still makes sense to me." Silence followed his confession. "Lyra." Fear clutched at him. Had she lost consciousness? Or worse, "There may be a way." Her voice finally came, so faint he nearly missed it. "The passage widens into a chamber. On this side, if you continue forward, you might find another route." Hope was a dangerous luxury he had denied himself for years, but now he grasped at it desperately. "I'll find you," he promised. "Hold on." With renewed purpose, Kalen pressed deeper into the cave system. The passages twisted and branched, forcing him to make educated guesses at each junction. Twice he encountered dead ends and had to backtrack. All the while, the distant booms of continuing sonic charges reminded him that time was running short. After what felt like hours of increasingly desperate searching, the narrow passage suddenly opened into a vast underground chamber. Stalactites hung like ancient spears from the ceiling, and a phosphorescent fungus provided an eerie blue illumination. Across the chamber, barely visible in the dim light, was another passage, and beyond it, the unmistakable silhouette of Lyra's motionless form. "Lyra!" He rushed toward her, heedless of safety. She lay half-buried under rubble, a large slab of rock pinning her lower body. Blood matted her silver-white hair, and her breathing came in shallow, labored gasps. But her eyes opened at his approach, focusing on him with effort. "You found me." Disbelief tinged her weakened voice. "I said I would." Kalen was already assessing the rubble, calculating how to free her without causing further injury. "I need to move this rock, but it might cause more pain." She managed a ghost of her usual defiant expression. "I'm a warrior of the first hunt. Pain is merely information." Despite everything, he felt a smile tug at his lips. "Hang on to that attitude. This won't be pleasant." Using a broken stalactite as a lever, Kalen carefully transferred the weight of the rock slab until Lyra could drag herself free. The effort left them both gasping, but a quick assessment showed her injuries, while serious, were not immediately life-threatening. Her left leg was broken, and she had lost blood from multiple lacerations, but her spine appeared intact. "We need to find a defensible position," Kalen said as he fashioned a crude splint for her leg. "That patrol is still up there, and they're getting more aggressive with those charges." Lyra gripped his wrist, her strength surprising given her condition. "Why did you come back for me?" "The truth." Kalen met her gaze steadily. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped being my captive and started being someone I care about. The admission hung between them, as substantial as the stone that had pinned her moments before. Lyra's expression softened, vulnerability replacing her habitual guardedness. Among my people, there is a saying, in the darkness, we see true forms. Perhaps it took these caves for us to see each other clearly. Another sonic charge, much closer now, interrupted the moment. Dust rained down from the chamber ceiling. "We need to move," Kaelin said, helping her to her feet. With Lyra leaning heavily against him, they made their way through a series of increasingly narrow passages that spiraled gradually upward. The charges continued, but grew more distant as they progressed. They emerged finally into the pre-dawn light on a ridge well away from their previous position. Below them stretched the vast canopy of the jungle, shrouded in morning mist. Above, the fading stars competed with the first hints of sunrise. Exhaustion overtook them both. They collapsed in the shelter of an overhanging rock, Lyra's injured leg carefully extended, Kaelin sitting protectively beside her. As full daylight brought color to the world around them, a Terran patrol vessel appeared on the horizon, moving away from their position. The immediate danger had passed, but its presence confirmed Kaelin's suspicions. This was no random search. "They won't stop looking," he said grimly. "Something's changed. After 3 years of relative quiet, why hunt for a deserter now?" Lyra studied his profile. "What do you know that makes you so valuable to them after all this time?" Kaelin's expression darkened with memory. "I accessed classified files before I deserted. Evidence of systematic atrocities being committed under the guise of pacification. Names, dates, locations. Enough to collapse the entire command structure if it went public. And they believe you still have this information," Lyra concluded. "I do." He tapped his temple. "Memorize the key details before destroying the physical evidence. Insurance policy." Lyra was silent for a long moment, absorbing this revelation. "My people also seek me," she finally said, "though for different reasons." Kaelin turned to her with surprise. He had assumed her status as Saren Lost would make her an outcast, someone her people would shun rather than pursue. "The first hunt is led by my blood sister," Lyra explained. "She would search for me not to welcome me back, but to ensure the dishonor of capture does not taint our lineage." Her voice held resigned certainty. "She would grant me a warrior's death, quick and honorable, but death nonetheless." The implications settled heavily between them. They were both hunted, both unable to return to their former lives. "So where does that leave us?" Kaelin asked. Lyra's violet eyes met his, a new resolve hardening her features despite her injuries. "It leaves us with a choice. Continue running separately, or find a way forward together," he finished. The following days brought a new rhythm to their existence. They found a more permanent shelter, a cave high in the cliffs that offered both protection and a commanding view of the surrounding terrain. Lyra's injuries healed gradually under Kaelin's attentive care, and she in turn taught him more sophisticated hunting and tracking techniques. The bindings were long gone now. The captor-captive dynamic dissolved into something more equal and infinitely more complex. Yet neither spoke directly of this transformation, as if naming it might somehow break the fragile peace they had constructed. It was Lyra who finally broached the subject that had remained unspoken between them. As they sat watching the twin moons rise over the jungle canopy, she turned to him with uncharacteristic hesitation. "In the cave, when you thought I might die, you said you needed me to live. Why?" Kaelin was silent for a long moment, weighing honesty against the comfort of evasion. "Because you remind me that there's more to existence than just survival," he finally answered. "Because when I look at you, I remember what it means to care about something, someone, beyond just making it to the next day." He expected her to withdraw from such naked sentiment, but instead, she moved closer, her shoulder touching his as they sat side by side. "Among my people," she said softly, "warriors sometimes form bonds stronger than blood, connections forged in battle and hardship that transcend ordinary relationships. And is that what we have?" Kalen asked, his voice equally soft. A warrior's bond? Lyra turned to face him, her expression more open than he had ever seen it. I think we have something that has no name in either of our cultures. Something new. The kiss that followed was tentative at first, a question rather than a demand. But when Kalen responded, his hands gently framing her face, the uncertainty vanished. The connection between them, built slowly through survival and shared hardship, crystallized into something undeniable. Later, as they lay together beneath the alien stars, Lyra traced the scars that mapped Kalen's history across his skin. "These tell your story," she murmured. "Each mark of battle survived." "Not all scars are visible," he replied, thinking of the nightmares that still plagued him, the guilt that still gnawed at his conscience. "No," she agreed, her fingers finding the jagged scar above his heart, the one she had given him during their first encounter. "But even the unseen ones shape us." She placed her palm flat against his chest. "The heart that beats beneath this scar is not the same heart that first captured me, just as I'm not the same warrior who was captured." The truth of her words resonated between them. They had remade each other through their unlikely journey from enemies to lovers. Their peaceful existence could not last indefinitely. The reality of their situation intruded one morning in the form of a Rintai scouting party moving through the valley below their shelter. Lyra spotted them immediately, her body tensing at the sight of her kinsmen. "They are searching the area systematically," she observed, her voice carefully neutral. "Tila leads them, my blood sister." Kalen watched the alien warriors moving with the same fluid grace that characterized Lyra's movements. "Will they find us here?" "Eventually," she replied. "The first hunt does not abandon a trail until it ends in either recovery or confirmation of death." The implications settled between them like a physical weight. "Then we need to leave this place," Kalen said. "Find somewhere beyond the reach of both our peoples." Lyra turned to him, her expression troubled. "There is nowhere on Nexus 7 that the first hunt cannot eventually track. And your Terran patrols control the limited off-world transport." "Then we make a choice," Kalen said with sudden resolve. "We stop running and start fighting back. Use what we know against them." "What do you propose?" Lyra asked, curiosity and caution mingling in her voice. "There's a communication relay station at the edge of the Western Quadrant," Kalen explained, his military training evident in his precise descriptions. "If we can access their systems, I can transmit the evidence I have against the Terran command to every major settlement in the sector. Once it's public, they lose their power to hunt us." "And my people?" Lyra asked, her violet eyes reflecting the uncertainty she rarely allowed herself to show. Kalen considered this carefully. "Is there any way to address the Saren law status? You mentioned there were historical precedents for reclaiming it." Lyra was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. "The trials of redemption. A warrior who is Saren lost may undergo 3 trials of extreme peril, witnessed by a tribal elder. If they survive, their Saren may be restored." Her expression hardened with realism. "But no elder would agree to witness for me now. I am considered tainted by my capture." "Then we create our own path," Kalen said with quiet determination. "Your people respect strength and honor above all else, correct? What if we demonstrated both in ways they couldn't ignore?" A plan began to form between them, audacious and desperate, but offering a slim chance of freedom from both their pasts. They would need supplies, weapons, and perfect timing. Over the following days, they meticulously mapped out their strategy, each contributing their unique skills and knowledge. The Terran relay station was primarily automated, with only a skeleton crew for maintenance and security. Its isolation made it vulnerable, but also meant that help would arrive quickly if an alarm was triggered. Their window of opportunity would be narrow. As for the Rintai, Lyra knew their hunting patterns and ritual obligations. There would be a moonlight gathering in 10 days, a ceremony where all hunters, including the first hunt, would return to the sacred groves near their settlement. It would be their best chance to approach without being detected. The preparations consumed them, providing distraction from the growing awareness that their plan might well end in failure and death. Each night, as they rested in each other's arms, the unspoken possibility that these might be their final days together hung between them. On the eve of their departure, as the larger of Nexus 7's moons cast blue shadows across their shelter, Lyra performed a ritual Kalen had not seen before. She extracted a small vial of iridescent liquid from a hidden compartment in her armor and used it to trace elaborate patterns across her skin. The marking of intent, she explained, noticing his curious gaze. Warriors perform it before battles where death is likely. It ensures that if we fall, our spirits find their way to the eternal hunt. She hesitated, then extended the vial toward him. Would you accept my marking? It would mean that whatever awaits beyond death, we would face it together. The significance of the gesture was not lost on Kalen. This was more than strategic alliance or even a physical intimacy they had shared. This was Lyra offering him a place within her most sacred beliefs. I will be honored, he said simply. Her fingers were cool against his skin as she traced the patterns across his chest and forehead. The liquid tingled where it touched, leaving behind markings that seemed to shimmer with their own inner light. There, she said when she had finished. Now you carry the blessing of the first hunt, though they would be furious to know it. A rare smile softened her features. It suits you. In the pre-dawn darkness, they made their final preparations. Weapons were checked and rechecked. Their few possessions were packed for rapid movement. They had decided to travel light and fast, abandoning the relative safety of their cliffside shelter for the uncertainty of their mission. As the first rays of sunlight crested the jungle canopy, Kalen paused at the entrance to the cave that had been their home. Lyra stood beside him, her hand finding his in a brief moment of connection. Whatever happens, she said quietly, know that you have restored what I thought was forever lost. You're Saren, Kalen asked. My belief that honor exists beyond the boundaries we are taught. She squeezed his hand once before releasing it. Kulme. The day grows no younger with our lingering. Their journey took them through the most treacherous regions of the jungle, areas even the local predators avoided due to toxic vegetation and unstable terrain. It was a calculated risk. No patrols, Terran, or Rintai would expect anyone to willingly enter such hostile territory. On the third day, as they navigated a particularly dangerous section of swampland, Kalen's foot broke through a seemingly solid patch of ground. He sank instantly to his waist in bubbling, acidic mud. Don't struggle, Lyra commanded, already removing a length of flexible vine from her pack. It will only pull you down faster. The mud burned where it touched his skin, eating through the fabric of his clothing. Kalen forced himself to remain still despite the pain, focusing on controlling his breathing as Lyra secured the vine around a sturdy tree and then around her own waist. She approached the edge of the sinkhole with careful, measured steps. Take my hands. On my signal, pull hard, but do not thrash. Their fingers interlocked with desperate strength. Lyra braced, herself, muscles tensing as she prepared to counterbalance his weight. Now, their combined strength, enhanced by the desperate need for survival, proved just enough. With an agonizing slowness, the suction of the mud released its grip. Inch by excruciating inch, Kalen was drawn from what would have been a horrific death. When he finally lay gasping on solid ground, the lower half of his body was a map of chemical burns and raw flesh. We need to clean these wounds immediately, Lyra said, her voice calm, but her eyes betraying her concern. The toxic elements will continue to damage tissue until neutralized. She led him to a nearby stream, helping him remove the tattered remains of his lower garments. The cool water provided momentary relief, but they both knew it was insufficient treatment for such extensive burns. There's a healing herb that grows in these swamps, Lyra said, her eyes scanning the surrounding vegetation. The Rintai call it mercy leaf. Its sap counteracts most natural toxins. She found the plant within the hour, broad-leafed and unassuming, easily overlooked among the more vibrant jungle flora. The application of its milky sap was immediate in its relief, numbing the worst of the pain and visibly reducing the angry redness of the burns. "How did you know this plant would be here?" Kalen asked as Lyra carefully wrapped his treated legs with clean strips of fabric. "My first hunt as a warrior was in these swamps," she replied, her focus on her task. "3 of my hunt sisters fell to the toxic mud. Our elder showed us the mercy leaf, but it was too late for them." Her hands stilled momentarily. "I memorized its appearance and habitat, vowing never to lose another to such a death. The incident delayed their journey by 2 precious days, time they could ill afford to lose." Kalen insisted on continuing despite his injuries, though their pace was significantly slowed. Lyra fashioned a walking staff from a sturdy branch, but even with its support, each step was an exercise in controlled agony. "We should reconsider our timeline," Lyra suggested as they made camp on the 5th night, noting Kalen's exhaustion despite his attempts to hide it. "The relay station will still be there in another week. And so will more security personnel," Kalen countered. "There's a rotation schedule. Right now, they're at minimum staffing. In 8 days, that changes." He met her concerned gaze with stubborn determination. "I can do this." Lyra recognized the pride that drove him, the same pride that would have prevented her from showing weakness in his position. Rather than argue further, she nodded once in acknowledgement. "Then we adapt," she said simply. "I will scout ahead each day, ensuring we take the path of least resistance. At night, I will apply more mercy leaf to speed your healing." The arrangement proved effective. By carefully selecting their route and traveling during the cooler hours, they maintained a sustainable pace. Kalen's wounds began to heal, though the process left scars that would likely never fade completely, new markings to add to his collection of survival stories. On the 8th day, they reached the edge of the swamplands. Beyond stretched a vast plain of strange, geometric rock formations, the approach to the western quadrant where the relay station awaited. From their elevated position, they could just make out the station's communication arrays glinting in the distance. 1 day's journey, perhaps 2 with caution, Lyra assessed, her keen eyes scanning for patrols or surveillance equipment. Kalen nodded, studying the terrain with a strategist's eye. The rock formations provide good cover, but also potential ambush points. "We'll need to move carefully." They made their final preparations that night, checking weapons and reviewing their plan one last time. The strategy was high risk. Lyra would create a diversion at the station's perimeter, while Kalen infiltrated the communications center. He would need approximately 5 minutes to upload his evidence and trigger the system-wide broadcast. After that, they would rendezvous at a designated point and make their escape before reinforcements arrived. "If I'm not at the rendezvous point within 15 minutes of the broadcast," Kalen said, his voice deliberately neutral, "don't wait." Lyra's expression hardened. "That is not acceptable." "It's practical," he countered. "One of us needs to survive to ensure the information spreads." "We entered this together," Lyra said with finality. "We will leave together, or not all." Before he could argue further, she placed her hand over his heart, where the marks of her ritual still faintly glimmered. "You carry my blessing. I will not abandon its bearer to face death alone." The conviction in her voice silenced his objections. In truth, he found unexpected comfort in her stubborn loyalty, a quality he had once mistaken for mere warrior's pride, but now recognized as the core of her being. They began their approach to the relay station at first light, using the rock formations for cover as they advanced. The station itself was a utilitarian complex of interconnected structures, surrounded by a high-perimeter fence that hummed with energy. Surveillance drones made regular sweeps of the area, their sensors capable of detecting both movement and heat signatures. By midday, they had reached the final approach, a stretch of exposed terrain that offered no natural cover. They would need to wait for nightfall to make their final move. As they settled into a hidden position to wait out the remaining hours, Lyra suddenly tensed, her head tilting slightly as she listened. "What is it?" Kalen whispered, alert to her change in posture. "Rintai hunting calls," she replied, her voice barely audible. At least 3 warriors moving this way. Kalen's hand moved instinctively to his weapon. How did they find us? They haven't yet. They're following standard search patterns. Lyra's expression was grim, but their presence here is no coincidence. Something has changed. They pressed deeper into their hiding place as the sounds grew closer. Through a narrow gap in the rocks, they caught glimpses of the approaching Rintai warriors, tall, powerful figures moving with the liquid grace characteristic of their species. Their armor, similar to Lyra's but in different configurations, gleamed in the harsh sunlight. The one in the lead, Lyra whispered, a complex emotion tightening her features. "That is Tila, my blood sister." Kalen studied the warrior Lyra indicated. The family resemblance was evident. The same striking features and commanding presence, though Tila's markings were more elaborate, denoting her higher status. "Will she pass by?" he asked. Lyra shook her head slightly. "She is the finest tracker of the first hunt. If we have left any trace, she will find it." As if confirming her assessment, the hunting party suddenly halted. Tila raised her hand in a sharp gesture, then dropped into a crouch, examining something on the ground. Even from a distance, her body language conveyed discovery and focus. "She's found our trail," Lyra confirmed, her voice tight with tension. "We need to move now." Their options were severely limited. Moving would expose them, but staying meant certain discovery. With silent communication born of their weeks together, they formulated a hasty plan. They would use the network of rock formations to circle around and approach the station from another direction. They began to retreat slowly, one careful movement at a time. They had almost reached a connecting passage when disaster struck. A loose stone shifted under Kalen's weight, sending a cascade of smaller rocks tumbling down the formation. The sound, magnified in the silent landscape, might as well have been a battle cry. "There!" Tila's voice rang out, followed by the high-pitched whistle of Rintai hunting signals. "Run!" Kalen urged, abandoning stealth for speed. They fled through the maze of rock formations, their planned route forgotten in the desperate need to escape immediate capture. Behind them, the hunting calls of the Rintai grew closer with alarming speed. "They're hurting us," Lyra realized aloud as they emerged into a small clearing surrounded by unscalable rock walls. "This is a hunting trap." Kalen assessed their position with grim recognition. 3 passages led into the clearing, and the Rintai were positioned to cover all of them. They were caught. "Options?" he asked, his back against Lyra's as they faced outward, weapons ready. "Few," she replied tersely, "and none good." The first Rintai warrior appeared at one of the passages, weapon raised but not firing. Yet, another appeared at the second entrance, mirroring the position. And then Tila herself stepped into view at the central passage, her expression a complex mixture of triumph and something less definable as her eyes locked onto Lyra. "Sister," Tila said in the musical language of their people, which Kalen's translator rendered in stilted but understandable terms. "You live, though your Saren is lost." "I live," Lyra agreed, her stance proud despite their desperate situation. "And my Saren is not as lost as you might believe." Tila's attention shifted to Kalen, her expression hardening. "You stand with a human, your captor. This only confirms the depth of your disgrace." "Not my captor," Lyra corrected firmly. "My chosen mate." The declaration sent a visible shock through the assembled Rintai warriors. Tila's face registered disbelief followed by disgust. "Then you have fallen further than we feared," she said coldly. "The mercy of a clean death is too generous for such perversion." "Before you pass judgment," Lyra replied, her voice steady, "hear my claim. I invoke the right of challenge." A ripple of surprise moved through the hunting party. Tila's eyes narrowed dangerously. "The right of challenge is for warriors with standing," she countered. "You are Saren lost. You have no standing to make such a claim." "I claim standing through the ancient law of Varenthal," Lyra persisted. 3 trials survived, 3 deaths cheated. I have fulfilled the requirements for consideration." Kalen watched the exchange with tense attention, understanding that Lyra was navigating some complex cultural territory that might offer them a slim chance. Tila's expression shifted to calculation. You claim fulfillment of the 3 trials? Name them. Lyra stood taller, her voice taking on a formal cadence. First, survival against the Nexa beetle, an apex predator that would have claimed my life. Second, escape from certain death in the cave collapse that should have crushed me. Third, rescue from the toxic swamp that has claimed countless warriors before me. And who witnesses these claims? Tila demanded. No elder was present. He was, Lyra said, indicating Kalen. My chosen mate witnessed all 3 trials and can attest to their truth. A human cannot serve as witness in Rintai law, Tila dismissed. Ancient law makes no specification about the species of the witness, Lyra countered. Only that they must be of warrior status and honor. A murmur ran through the assembled warriors. What Lyra said was technically true. The ancient laws predated contact with other species, and therefore contained no prohibitions against non-Rintai witnesses. Tila's jaw clenched visibly as she found herself in an unexpected legal quandary. To dismiss Lyra's claim outright would risk appearing to violate ancient law, a serious matter among their tradition-bound people. Even if I were to accept this. Human, as witness, she said carefully, the right of challenge requires specific conditions. What exactly do you propose to challenge? Lyra's response was immediate and confident. I challenge the definition of Serenlost itself. I claim that true honor comes not from circumstance, but from choice, not from tradition, but from action. It was an audacious claim, a fundamental challenge to Rintai cultural understanding. Kalen could see the shock it produced in the surrounding warriors. Tila's voice dropped dangerously low. You would upend generations of sacred tradition on your word alone. Not on my word, Lyra replied. On my deeds. Allow me to complete one final trial, a task of your choosing that serves the good of our people. Judge me by my actions, not by rigid interpretations of ancient law. A tense silence fell over the clearing as Tila considered the challenge. Finally, she spoke. You will have your trial, she declared, but it will be one that tests not just your skill but your loyalty. There is a Terran facility nearby that threatens our territory with its broadcasts. Destroy it, and your claim will be considered by the Council of Elders. Kalen and Lyra exchanged a quick glance, the irony of the situation not lost on either of them. The relay station they had planned to infiltrate was now their assigned target. I accept this trial, Lyra said formally. My companion and I will destroy the Terran facility. Your companion? Tila's tone was skeptical. This is your trial alone, sister. The ancient laws state that a warrior undergoing the trials of redemption may choose one companion to stand witness. Lyra countered smoothly. I choose him. Again, Tila found herself constrained by the letter of ancient law. Very well, she conceded with visible reluctance. But understand this. If you fail, if you attempt to flee, or if there is any deception, you both will die. My hunters will remain in position to ensure this. We understand, Lyra acknowledged. Grant us until nightfall to prepare. With a curt nod, Tila signaled her warriors to withdraw to monitoring positions. When they were relatively alone again, Kalen turned to Lyra with a mixture of admiration and concern. That was either brilliant or suicidal, he said quietly. Possibly both. Lyra's expression was grim but determined. It bought us time and maintained our original objective. We can still transmit your evidence during the destruction of the facility. And afterward, your sister doesn't strike me as the forgiving type. One problem at a time, Lyra replied pragmatically. First, we succeed in our mission. Then we worry about surviving my sister's judgment. As darkness fell, they made their final preparations. Their plan remained essentially the same, though with the added complication of needing to create an impressive enough destruction to satisfy Tila without actually preventing the transmission of Kalen's evidence. The generator housing, Kalen suggested as they reviewed the station's layout one last time. If we detonate an explosive there after the transmission is complete, it would create a spectacular display without compromising the initial broadcast. The backup systems would maintain the signal distribution even if the primary generator failed. Lyra nodded in agreement. A suitable demonstration of destructive intent while preserving the true purpose of our mission. They approached the perimeter fence under cover of darkness. The Rintai warriors had withdrawn to observation positions, watching but not interfering as Lyra had negotiated. Using equipment scavenged during their journey, Kalen created a localized disruption in the fence's energy field, enough to allow them to slip through without triggering the main alarms. Once inside the perimeter, they split up as planned. Lyra moved toward the generator housing to place their improvised explosives, while Kalen headed for the main communication center. The station was operating with minimal staff, as expected. Kalen encountered only 2 guards on his approach to the central building, both easily avoided by using the shadows and his military training. The communication center itself was secured by an electronic lock, a significant obstacle, but one he had prepared for by salvaging components from abandoned equipment during their journey. While he worked on bypassing the security system, Lyra completed placing the explosives at strategic points around the generator housing. The charges were set with precision, enough to create an impressive destruction display without causing a catastrophic cascade failure that might endanger their escape. Kalen's improvised bypass finally succeeded, granting him access to the communication center. The room was unoccupied, standard procedure during night shifts when automated systems handled most functions. He moved quickly to the main console and began the process of accessing the broadcast systems. The security protocols were extensive but predictable, designed to prevent accidental transmission rather than deliberate sabotage from someone with insider knowledge. Within minutes, he had created an override that would allow him to broadcast on all frequencies simultaneously. His fingers flew across the interface as he prepared the data package. Evidence of atrocities committed by Terran Militia High Command, locations of mass graves, copies of illegal orders, testimony from other deserters he had encountered over the years. He had carried this burden of knowledge for so long that releasing it felt almost like physical unburdening. As the system began the transmission sequence, a proximity alert flashed on one of the secondary monitors. Someone was approaching the communication center. Security personnel responding to subtle anomalies in the system that his override had created. Kalen worked faster, eyes darting between the upload progress indicator and the security feed. 60% complete. Footsteps in the corridor outside. 75%. The sound of voices, alert and suspicious. 90%. The door to the communication center slid open just as the system confirmed complete transmission. Kalen had a split second to activate the emergency protocol he'd programmed. A system-wide data purge that would hide evidence of his specific actions while maintaining the broadcast already in progress. Hey, you. Hands where I can see them. The security officer's weapon was already drawn, aimed steadily at Kalen's chest. Kalen slowly raised his hands, mind racing through options. He needed to buy just a little more time, enough for the broadcast to reach the primary relay satellites and begin its autonomous distribution. "How'd you get in here?" the officer demanded, reaching for his communication device with his free hand. "Control, we have an intruder in the comm center. Need backup immediately." "I surrendered voluntarily," Kalen said, injecting his voice with a believable mix of fear and relief. "I'm a deserter. Been surviving in the jungle for years. I couldn't take it anymore." The officer's expression showed skepticism, but also momentary confusion. Deserters typically didn't break into high-security installations. "On your knees, hands behind your head," he ordered. Kalen complied slowly, watching the progress indicators on the monitors behind the officer. The broadcast had reached the main relay stations. It was too late to stop now. The evidence would spread across the sector within minutes. The momentary distraction of checking the officer's communication device was all the opening Lyra needed. She appeared in the doorway like a silent phantom, her movements so fluid it seemed almost casual as she disarmed the officer with one precise strike. The man crumpled, unconscious but alive. Lyra gave Kalen a questioning look. "It's done," he confirmed. Time for the fireworks. They made their way quickly toward the exit, avoiding the response team that was now converging on the communication center. Once clear of the building, Lyra activated the detonator. The resulting explosion transformed the generator housing into a spectacular fountain of fire and debris, exactly as they had planned. Alarms blared throughout the complex as emergency protocols engaged. In the chaos, they slipped back through the same section of fence they had used for entry and disappeared into the darkness beyond the perimeter. The Rintai warriors were waiting at the designated observation point, Tila at their center. Her expression was unreadable as she watched the flames consuming part of the Terran facility. The mission is complete, Lyra announced formally. The facility's communication capability has been destroyed. It was technically true. The primary communication systems would be offline until repairs could be completed, even though the broadcast had already been sent. Tila studied her sister with calculated assessment. So it appears, she acknowledged. But the Council will require more than a distant view of flames to judge your claim. You will return with us to face their judgment. Kalen tensed, sensing the precariousness of their position. The plan had succeeded. His evidence was now spreading across the sector, beyond the ability of Terran Command to contain it. But they were still deep in hostile territory, surrounded by warriors who might decide to execute them both at any moment. We will come, Lyra agreed, her voice steady, but as honored guests under protection of ancient law, not as prisoners. Tila's mouth tightened, but she gave a curt nod. Under protection of law, she confirmed, until the Council decides otherwise. The journey to the Rintai settlement took 3 days. They traveled in silence for the most part, surrounded by the hunting party that watched them with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Tila maintained a formal distance from her sister, though Kalen occasionally caught her studying Lyra with an expression that hinted at deeper, more complex emotions beneath her stern exterior. For his part, Kalen used the journey to observe and learn. This was the first extensive contact he'd had with Rintai culture beyond Lyra, and he recognized that his survival might depend on understanding their customs and hierarchies. The settlement itself was unlike anything Kalen had expected. Rather than the primitive village he had imagined, the Rintai lived in a harmonious integration of advanced technology and natural elements. Dwellings were constructed within and around massive living trees, connected by an intricate network of bridges and platforms. Energy fields similar to the one at the Terran facility protected the perimeter, but these seemed designed to work with the environment rather than against it. Their arrival caused an immediate stir. Warriors and civilians alike emerged to watch as Tila led them through the settlement toward a massive central structure built around the largest tree Kalen had ever seen. The council tree, Lyra explained quietly, noting his odd expression. The eldest living thing on Nexus 7, said to have witnessed the first landing of our ancestors. Inside, the council chamber was a marvel of natural acoustics and filtered light. 7 elders sat in a semicircle on elevated seats fashioned from the living wood of the tree itself. Their age was evident in the elaborate patterns that covered their skin, far more complex than those of younger warriors, telling stories of countless battles and honors earned. Tila presented the case with formal precision, recounting the circumstances of finding Lyra, the claim of completed trials, and the destruction of the Terran facility. She was careful to include all relevant details while maintaining an appearance of neutrality, though Kalen detected subtle inflections that suggested her continued disapproval. When she finished, the central elder, a female with intricate silver markings covering most of her visible skin, turned her gaze to Lyra. You claim fulfillment of the ancient requirements for restoration of Saren, she stated, her voice carrying the weight of authority. Yet you also claim that the very concept of Saren lost requires re-examination. These positions seem contradictory. Lyra stepped forward, her posture respectful but unintimidated. I seek restoration through the ancient laws to demonstrate my honor according to tradition, she explained. But I also ask the council to consider that true honor transcends rigid interpretations of circumstance. My capture did not diminish my warrior spirit or my loyalty to our people, as evidenced by my actions against the Terran threat. The elder's expression remained impassive. And what of this human? You call him mate, a sacred designation among our people. By what right do you extend such recognition to an outsider? By right of shared survival, Lyra answered without hesitation. By right of mutual protection and sacrifice. He has shed blood in my defense, as I have in his. He has witnessed my trials and stood beside me in battle. In all ways that matter to a warrior's heart, he has earned the designation. Murmurs spread through the assembled witnesses. The elder raised a hand for silence. Human, she addressed Kalen directly. What say you to these claims? Do you understand the significance of the bond this warrior describes? Kalen stepped forward, meeting the elder's penetrating gaze. I understand that among your people, such bonds are sacred and enduring, he replied carefully. I understand that to accept such a bond is to commit one's life and honor to another's well-being and glory. And I understand that Lyra honors me beyond measure by considering me worthy of such a designation. The elder studied him with increased interest. You speak with unexpected wisdom for a human. Tell me, what becomes of your own people's claims upon your loyalty if you accept this bond? It was a piercing question, cutting to the heart of their circumstances. Kalen thought of the evidence now spreading across the sector, the bridges he had permanently burned. My people's leadership betrayed the principles they claimed to uphold, he said, his voice gaining strength with conviction. They ordered the slaughter of innocents and called it peace. They demanded obedience to dishonorable commands and called it loyalty. I rejected those claims when I deserted, and I reject them still. The elder nodded slowly, then turned her attention back to Lyra. One final question before we deliberate. If this council rules against your claim, if we determine that your Saren remains lost and this human is not acceptable as mate, what then? Lyra's answer came without hesitation. Then we will depart from your lands and make our way elsewhere. I will remain Kalen's mate by my choice, if not by your recognition, and I will carry the teachings of our people in my heart, even if I no longer carry the formal designation of warrior. The straightforward response seemed to satisfy the elder. With a gesture, she indicated the council would withdraw to deliberate. Guards escorted Lyra and Kalen to a waiting area, comfortable but clearly monitored. How long will they take? Kalen asked quietly once they were relatively alone. It could be hours or days, Lyra replied. Decisions of this significance are not made hastily among my people. In fact, the deliberation lasted through the night and into the following day. They were provided with food and basic amenities, but no information about the council's discussions. Tila visited once, her manner stiffly formal as she confirmed certain details about the Terran facility's destruction. It was late afternoon when they were finally summoned back to the council chamber. The atmosphere seemed changed somehow, more charged with anticipation. A larger crowd had gathered to witness the pronouncement. The central elder rose as they entered, indicating this was a formal judgment. Lyra of the First Hunt, we have considered your claims with the weight they deserve, she began. The evidence of your completed trials is accepted, as is the testimony regarding your actions against the Terran threat. A ripple of reaction moved through the assembled crowd. The elder continued. More difficult was your challenge to our understanding of Saren itself. For generations, our people have held certain truths as immutable. Yet the purpose of wisdom is not to preserve unchanging doctrine, but to guide our people toward honorable existence in changing circumstances. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the chamber before settling again on Lyra. The council finds that true honor indeed resides in choice rather than circumstance alone. Your Saren is restored, not merely through fulfillment of ancient requirements, but through demonstration of the warrior spirit that transcends traditional boundaries. Relief and vindication washed over Lyra's face, though she maintained the composed dignity expected of a warrior before the council. As for the human, the elder continued, turning to Kalen, we find that the bond you describe meets the essential requirements of mate joining in spirit if not in traditional form. However, full recognition requires formal oath-taking according to our customs. She fixed Kalen with a penetrating gaze. Would you, outsider, be willing to undertake the sacred oaths of our people, binding yourself to this warrior and to the honorable principles she upholds? I would, Kalen replied without hesitation. The elder nodded in satisfaction. Then let it be prepared. At tomorrow's dawn, you will speak the ancient words and be recognized among us, not as Rin-Tai, for that you cannot become, but as honored ally and mate bond to one of our finest warriors. As they left the council chamber, the atmosphere around them had transformed. Where before there had been suspicion and hostility, now there was cautious curiosity. Warriors who had previously kept their distance now acknowledged Lyra with the formal gestures of respect due a restored Saren-bearer. Tila approached them as they reached the dwelling assigned for their use. A small but elegant structure nestled among the branches of a lesser tree. "Sister," she said, the formality in her voice slightly lessened. "The council has spoken, and I honor their wisdom." Lyra inclined her head in acknowledgement. "Your testimony was fair, blood sister. I expected no less." "The oath-taking will require preparation," Tila continued, turning to include Kalen in the conversation. "There are rituals to be observed, words to be learned. Will you guide us?" Lyra asked, a subtle olive branch extended in the simple question. Something flickered in Tila's expression, perhaps surprise, perhaps reluctant softening. "It is my right as blood sister," she confirmed. "I will come at first light to begin the preparations." After Tila departed, Lyra and Kalen found themselves truly alone for the first time since their capture by the hunting party. Their assigned dwelling was simple but beautiful, with walls that seemed to grow naturally from the living wood of the tree and furnishings that blended organic materials with sophisticated craftsmanship. "So," Kalen said as they stood in the center of their new dwelling, "tomorrow I become your husband by the laws of your people." Lyra's expression softened into one of the rare, genuine smiles that still made his heart quicken. "Are you having second thoughts, ex-soldier?" "Not one," he replied, moving closer to her. "But I'm curious about these oaths I'll be taking. Should I be concerned?" "The mate bond oaths are sacred among my people," Lyra explained, her hand finding his. "They speak of shared purpose, mutual protection, and the joining of life paths until death. They commit you to honor not just me, but the principles I uphold. So nothing too different from what we've already been living," Kalen observed with gentle humor. Her violet eyes held his with sudden intensity. "There is one aspect you should understand fully before tomorrow. The bond is considered unbreakable among my people. There is no concept of separation or dissolution. Once sworn, the oath is binding until death. Where I come from, they used to say till death do us part," Kalen replied. "I always thought that was how it should be." He brought her hand to his lips in a gesture that had become natural between them. "I have no intention of parting from you, Lyra, in this life or whatever might come after." The preparations began before dawn, as promised. Tila arrived with two other female warriors who were introduced as oath witnesses, a traditional requirement for the ceremony. They brought with them ceremonial garments for both Lyra and Kalen, along with the materials for the ritual markings that would precede the oath-taking. "The human must learn the words precisely," Tila instructed, handing Kalen a small, translucent tablet inscribed with flowing Rin-Tai script. His translator rendered the text into understandable language, though he suspected much of the poetic nuance was lost in the conversion. While Kalen studied the oath words, Lyra underwent her own preparations. The female warriors helped her into a ceremonial armor unlike her battle gear, lighter, more ornate, clearly designed for ritual rather than protection. The symbolic significance was not lost on Kalen. She was presenting herself as both warrior and potential life-giver, the dual aspects of Rin-Tai femininity. For his part, Kalen was provided with a garment that blended elements of traditional Rin-Tai male ceremonial wear with adaptations that acknowledged his different physiology. The material was surprisingly comfortable despite its formal appearance. a deep blue fabric that seemed to shift with movement, embellished with symbols he recognized from Lyra's ritual markings. The blue represents loyalty and steadfastness, Tila explained when she noticed him examining the garment. The symbols are the ancient marks of oath-bound warriors, those who choose to align their fate with another's. As the sun began to rise, painting the massive trees in gold and amber light, the final preparations were completed. Tila herself applied the ceremonial markings to both their faces, intricate patterns that told the story of their journey from captivity to partnership. "These will fade within days," she told Kaelin as she finished his markings, "but the memory of their meaning should remain as a reminder of your oath." The ceremony itself took place in a small clearing at the base of the council tree. The 7 elders were present, along with what appeared to be representatives from each major family group within the settlement. Kaelin was surprised by the size of the gathering. He had expected a more private affair, given the unusual nature of their union. "Your restoration has become something of a legend already," Lyra murmured as they approached the ceremonial space. "And the joining of a Rintai warrior with an outsider is unprecedented. Many have come to witness what they will tell their descendants about in years to come." The ritual began with Lyra and Kaelin standing apart, on opposite sides of a circular pattern traced into the earth. The central elder spoke ancient words that established the sacred nature of the space and the moment. Then, one by one, each took a step forward, reciting a portion of the oath as they did so. Lyra spoke first, her voice clear and unwavering. "I, Lyra of the First Hunt, choose this path freely. I bind my days to yours, my strength to your protection, my honor to our shared purpose." Kaelin responded with the words he had memorized, surprised at how right they felt as he spoke them. "I, Kaelin, once soldier, now free, choose this path with open eyes and willing heart. I offer my life in service to our bond, my loyalty to our shared future, my strength to the protection of what we build together." Step by step, they moved toward the center of the circle, each phrase of the oath bringing them physically and symbolically closer. The words spoke of partnership in battle and peace, of mutual respect and protection, of honor that transcended cultural boundaries. When they reached the center, standing face to face, the final words were spoken in unison, a promise to walk a shared path for all their remaining days. Tila approached with a ceremonial cord woven from materials that held significance in Rintai tradition, strands representing strength, wisdom, fertility, and protection. The cord was wrapped around their joined hands, binding them physically as the oath bound them spiritually. The central elder spoke the words of confirmation, officially recognizing their union under Rintai law and custom. "What was separate is now joined," she proclaimed. "What was foreign is now familiar. The paths that once diverged now run as one. Let all who witness remember this day as the beginning of understanding between peoples once divided." As the ceremonial cord was unwound from their hands, Kaelin was surprised to find a faint pattern remained on his skin, a temporary mark that would fade gradually in the days to come, another reminder of the promises made. The formal ceremony concluded with an acknowledgement from representatives of each family group, a symbolic acceptance of a union by the wider community. Though some expressions remained guarded or uncertain, there was no outright hostility. It was, Kaelin reflected, a far more welcoming reception than he had dared to hope for. The celebration that followed was both familiar and alien, recognizable in its purpose as a wedding feast, yet distinctly Rintai in its execution. Food and drink were shared according to rituals that Lyra quietly explained as they progressed. Music unlike anything Kaelin had heard before filled the air, complex and haunting. Tila approached them during a lull in the festivities, her demeanor more relaxed than Kaelin had yet witnessed. "The union is recognized," she said, addressing them both. "You are now family, human, however unusual that may be." "I have a name, sister by bond," Kaelin replied with cautious humor. "Perhaps you might consider using it." Something like reluctant amusement flickered in Tila's expression. "Perhaps in time." "Kaelin." She turned to Lyra. her manner becoming more serious. "There is news you should both be aware of. The Terran facility you struck has been in chaos since your action. Their communications were disrupted, yes, but more significantly, information has been spreading through their networks. Information that appears to have caused significant upheaval in their command structure." Kalen carefully controlled his expression, though Lyra's quick glance told him she understood exactly what this meant. Their plan had worked. The evidence had spread before the facility's destruction. "How unfortunate for them," Lyra replied neutrally. "Their loss is our gain, I suppose." Tila's eyes narrowed slightly, suggesting she suspected there was more to the story, but she did not press the issue. Indeed, the Council believes this disruption offers an opportunity to negotiate more favorable boundaries with the Terran authorities, perhaps even a formal recognition of our territorial claims. "Your action may have benefited our people more than was initially apparent." With a formal nod that included both of them, she rejoined the main celebration, leaving them momentarily alone. "So," Lyra said quietly, "your mission succeeded as well as mine." "Seems that way," Kalen agreed. "Though I suspect your sister has her suspicions about the convenient timing." "Tila is many things, but she is not a fool," Lyra acknowledged. "However, she is also pragmatic. If the outcome benefits our people, she will not look too closely at the method." As the celebration continued into the evening, Kalen found himself experiencing something he had nearly forgotten, a sense of belonging. Not complete acceptance, certainly. There were still many among the Rintai who regarded him with wariness or curiosity rather than welcome. But for the first time since deserting the militia, he was not an outsider, not a fugitive. He had a place, a purpose, a connection. The days that followed brought a period of adjustment as they established their life within the Rintai community. Lyra resumed her position among the warriors, though now with the added distinction of her unusual restoration story. Kalen, with no established role, found himself in the novel position of creating his own place. His military training and survival skills proved valuable in unexpected ways. He began working with the Rintai hunters, introducing techniques from his background that complemented their traditional methods. His knowledge of Terran technology and tactics also became an asset as the Council developed their negotiation strategy with the now-destabilized Terran authorities. 1 month after their union ceremony, news arrived that confirmed the full extent of their success. The Terran Militia High Command had indeed been shattered by the evidence Kalen had released. Several key officers had been arrested for war crimes, and the remaining leadership was desperately trying to distance themselves from the atrocities committed under their authority. Into this power vacuum, the Rintai Council had sent representatives to negotiate. The resulting agreement exceeded their most optimistic expectations. Formal recognition of Rintai territorial sovereignty, non-interference guarantees, and even trade provisions that would benefit both societies. "Your evidence did this," Lyra told Kalen privately as they discussed the news in their dwelling. "Your years of carrying that burden, waiting for the right moment to release it, it changed everything." "Our actions did this," he corrected gently. "I couldn't have succeeded without you. And truthfully, I'm not sure I would have tried if we hadn't found each other. Before you, survival was enough. You reminded me there could be more." Their life settled into a rhythm that blended elements of both their backgrounds. Kalen's status among the Rintai gradually shifted from Lyra's unusual mate to a respected individual in his own right. His suggestions were considered on their merits rather than dismissed as outsider perspectives. He began learning the Rintai language properly, beyond what his translator could provide, discovering nuances and cultural concepts that deepened his understanding of Lyra and her people. For her part, Lyra thrived in her restored position, though her experiences had changed her perspective in ways that sometimes put her at odds with more traditional warriors. She became an advocate for adaptability within tradition, arguing that the strength of their culture lay not in rigid adherence to ancient ways, but in the wisdom to evolve while maintaining core principles. Their union, once viewed as an anomaly, gradually became a symbol of this evolving perspective. Other Rintai, began forming alliances and friendships with sympathetic humans from the more progressive settlements that replaced the militia outposts. Cultural exchange, tentative at first, grew more confident as both sides discovered unexpected commonalities beneath surface differences. 6 months after their ceremony, as they stood on a high observation platform, watching the distant ocean that neither had seen before their journey together, Lyra turned to Kaelin with unexpected vulnerability in her expression. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Taking me captive that day in the jungle?" All that followed from that moment. Kaelin considered the question seriously, his gaze moving from the horizon to her face, still the most beautiful sight he had encountered on this alien world. "I regret the pain it caused you," he answered honestly, "the shame and loss you experienced. But I cannot regret where it led us." He took her hand, an intimate gesture that had become natural between them. From captive and captor to husband and wife, it's not a journey anyone could have predicted. "When you first bound my hands," Lyra said softly, "I would have killed you without hesitation given the chance." "I know," he replied with a small smile. "You made that abundantly clear. Now I would kill without hesitation to protect you," she continued, her violet eyes holding his with intensity. "The bond we share is stronger than any ceremonial cord or oath words. It was forged in survival and choice and sacrifice. Like the finest weapons," Kaelin observed, knowing she would appreciate the warrior's metaphor. She smiled in confirmation. "Exactly so. Tested in fire, strengthened by pressure, made resilient through use." As the twin sons of Nexus 7 began their descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in colors no Earth sunset could produce, they stood together at the boundary between land and sea, forest and open water, a fitting symbol for the boundaries they had crossed to find each other. They had begun as enemies defined by their cultures and circumstances. They had become reluctant allies through necessity. And finally, through choice and courage, they had transformed into partners bound by something stronger than obligation or convenience or even passion, a connection forged in the crucible of shared survival and mutual recognition of worth. Kaelin, once a soldier who had lost faith in everything he fought for, had found a new purpose and place among people he once considered alien and hostile. Lyra, once defined by rigid cultural traditions, had discovered that true honor transcended the boundaries set by others. Together, they stood as living proof that people could change, that enemies could become allies, that the barriers between cultures were more permeable than anyone believed. Their story, from captivity to partnership, from suspicion to trust, from isolation to community, became legendary among both their peoples. As the distant tide washed against the shore below them, Kaelin reflected that their journey together had been much like those waves, sometimes violent and overwhelming, sometimes gentle and nurturing, but always in motion, always changing, always finding new shores to touch. "No regrets," he said finally, answering her earlier question more completely. "Not about this, not about us. Whatever happens next, I chose to become your husband, and it's the best choice I've ever made." Lyra's response was not in words, but in the warrior's salute of her people, hand over heart, then extended toward him, transformed from formal gesture to intimate affirmation. In that moment, as the last light of day illuminated her face, Kaelin saw not the captive he had once bound, not the alien warrior who had threatened his life, but his partner, his equal, his chosen mate. They had traveled from captivity to freedom, from enmity to love, from isolation to belonging. Their story had no true ending, only the continuing journey of two lives now inextricably intertwined, the ex-soldier and the Amazon warrior who had found in each other something neither had believed possible, a home that existed not in any place but in the space they created together.